Scouting lore holds that one foggy London evening, Chicago publisher and world traveler William D Boyce was looking for an address. Lost in the notorious fog, a boy in uniform approached and asked if he could help the disoriented visitor. The youngster guided Boyce to his appointment, and when the American attempted to tip the young man for his help, the boy snapped a salute and explained that scouts do not take tips for doing good deeds. Now this intrigued Boyce, who asked what a scout was. The boy told Boyce about Baden-Powell's scouts. Boyce asked the scout if he could take him to the Boy Scout headquarters following his appointment. The boy agreed, and after the meeting delivered him to the scouting headquarters, where Boyce met scout officials, though not Baden-Powell himself, and he learned more about scouting. The unknown scout vanished into the fog, and Boyce returned to America with trunks full of scouting information, uniforms, and equipment, which he would then use to interest other men of national stature in taking and bringing scouting to the United States. We'll learn more about this founder of scouting, William D. Boyce, and his other scouting adventure, the Lone Scouts of America, on this edition of Artifact of the Week. William Dixon Boyce was born to a farm family in Plum, Pennsylvania in 1858. He began teaching school at the age of 16 and then worked a variety of odd jobs such as a coal miner, lumberjack, secretary and salesman in the Midwest and Canada before settling in Chicago in 1881 at the age of 23. Within 5 years, he founded the Mutual Newspaper Publishing Company, which provided advertisements and articles to over 200 newspapers. Over time, he took ownership over multiple newspapers and began a business empire. An interesting tidbit: during June through August of 1906, the government proposed quadrupling the postage rates for second-class mail, which included newspapers from 1 cent to 4 cents per pound. In response, Boyce proposed buying the post office department for $300 million, claiming that he would reduce postal rates by half, eliminate chronic deficits by applying business methods to postal operations, establish a rural postal express, pay rent to the United States Department of the Treasury for postal buildings, and still return profits over 7%. This offer was rejected by the government, but it did halt their planned second-class postage rate increase. Boyce was a prominent supporter of labor workers. His businesses employed many women, and he supported labor unions. His newspapers often carried stories about the nobility of labor, and his businesses even paid out wages and benefits during the Panic of 1893, a time when many businesses were laying off workers and cutting wages. During this time, he also began looking after the welfare of delivery boys in urban areas. With increasing urbanization and lack of supervision, young boys were viewed as particularly vulnerable to negative influences. Boyce saw the delivery service not only as a means of employment, but as also a way to teach American boys responsibility and other similar virtues. As his business and wealth grew, Boyce began traveling internationally for business and personal pleasure, such as expeditions. According to Boyce, it was on a stop into London during an expedition into Africa in 1909 that he met with the helpful scout that sparked his interest in the Boy Scouts. Upon his return from Africa, Boyce met with Edgar M. Robinson, an administrator for the YMCA, and several others about organizing the fledgling Boy Scouts as a national organization in America. Based on his own rural upbringing, Boyce emphasized the necessity for outdoorsmanship and good leadership for young boys. Scouting, he believed, was focused on teaching self-reliance, citizenship, resourcefulness, patriotism, obedience, cheerfulness, courage, and courtesy in order to make men. And so upon the incorporation of the BSA in 1910, Boyce signed up all of his newspaper delivery boys and pledged to donate $1,000 a month to the new organization for the first 2 years, with the stipulation that boys of all races and creeds be included. Despite this generous donation, he turned over most of the administrative duties of the organization to Robinson, who recruited the permanent executive board and brought in the expertise of Daniel Carter Beard and Ernest Thompson Seton with their own youth organizations of the Sons of Daniel Boone and the Woodcraft Indians. Though Boyce largely stepped back from the BSA by 1912, he remained concerned about American youth, particularly those in rural areas where youth could not meet in troops because of distance. To address these concerns, Boyce introduced and incorporated the Lone Scouts of America in 1915. The LSA program was inspired by the Lonecraft program of the British Boy Scout Association and by Ernest Thompson Seton's Woodcraft Indians program. It's reported that Boyce signed up all 30,000 of his newsboys as members of the Lone Scouts, and by October 1916, the LSA reported 133,000 members. In 1917, the LSA uniform was introduced, one of which we have on display here at the National Scouting Museum. There was also an advancement component as part of the program, which included 7 degrees, with the 7th and highest degree being called the Sagamore degree. There were also literary competitions held where Lone Scouts were recognized at 3 levels, the highest being the Lone Scout Quill Award. To help recruit new members, there was a booster award system with 2 levels, the highest being the Lone Scout Booster. Now, a Lone Scout who earned the Sagamore degree, the Lone Scout Quill Award, and the Lone Scout Booster recognition were identified as Supreme Scouts, and 123 of those were presented during the time of the LSA. To keep the members of the LSA connected, boys published a weekly newspaper called the Lone Scout. Boys were encouraged to write articles, stories, and cartoons for Lone Scout, and several prizes and contests were announced. By the end of 1920, Boyce and the LSA were in trouble. Membership numbers were wildly inflated, and financial difficulties forced Boyce to increase the price and move to a monthly publication of the magazine. Now, James E. West didn't really care for Boyce's organization, believing that the 4-H program was really meeting the needs of rural boys, and because Boyce was using the term scout, which West had spent a great deal of time and effort protecting the use of that term by the BSA, he wrote to Boyce several times to impress upon him his concerns over potential trademark and copyright violations. Now, while James West and the BSA never filed a lawsuit against Boyce or the LSA, they did make multiple offers over the years to merge the LSA into the Boy Scouts, and finally in 1924, Boyce agreed, and in the last issue of the Lone Scout, published in April of 1924, they announced the merger of the two organizations, bringing in approximately 45,000 youth participants at the time. The Lone Scout program continues to serve youth and provide BSA program to scouts that cannot meet in a traditional scouting program. Boyce was the 3rd recipient of the Silver Buffalo Award in 1926, the first year it was given, and the first 2 recipients being Lord Baden-Powell and the Unknown Scout. Even though he was no longer active in the scouting organization, Boyce continued to promote scouting in his publications and would host scout troops in his home. In June of 1929, Boyce died of pneumonia. At his funeral, 33 scouts served as pallbearers. Well, that's all the time we have for this week. Join us next time as we learn more about the history of the BSA through the collections of the National Scouting Museum and Artifact of the Week.